Alright, welcome back. This is the second part of our lecture on key concepts. The second concept that I wanted to emphasize, or the second idea, is the importance of precise language in the study of learning and motivation. Here's why I want to emphasize this. Oftentimes when we try to explain something, like we're trying to explain some psychological phenomena in our case, we reiterate, we say again the problem, we just rephrase it with different words, and we come to believe sometimes that such reiteration is actually a legitimate explanation. That's a mistake. Let me give you an example. I may ask myself, or I may ask somebody else, why do I remember a Christmas gift that I received back in 1986? Why do I remember it still today? It's a legitimate question. And I may say, I may provide as an explanation the following, that the reason why I remember that Christmas gift that I received back in 1986 was because of my strong memory of that event. If you think of it, that sounds like an explanation, because I'm making a statement that sounds like a cause-effect kind of situation. Because I have a strong memory of an event, I remember it. But in reality, remembering that event is what we call having a strong memory of it. It is really a circular definition, not really an explanation. Psychological explanations are very vulnerable to this kind of circular reasoning. And the science of learning is certainly no exception to this. So we want to make sure that we minimize the likelihood of pseudo-explanations. This is what these explanations are called. Pseudo-explanations. They sound like explanations, but they are not. We want to minimize their likelihood. And to do that, we will rely on a very precise use of language. An important aspect of this use of language is avoiding, to the extent that it is possible, the attribution of characteristics to the learning organism in order to explain its learning. We don't want to invoke some characteristic of the learning organism. We want to minimize the likelihood of doing that, of invoking this characteristic, this attribute of the learning organism as the reason for some kind of learning. For instance, let me give you an example. Let's go back to the example of the cat in Thorndike's box. We would not say, the cat got out of the Thorndike box quicker because it didn't like it being caged. We will want to avoid that kind of statement. Notice that I'm explaining the behavior of the animal. I'm explaining something that the animal might have learned, getting out of the box, by invoking a characteristic of the animal, it not liking being caged. Keep in mind Morgan's canon. We don't know what the cat likes or doesn't like. We don't want to invoke without due justification some kind of complex psychological trait to the animal that we don't know of. At least not in this example. We don't know in principle if the animal likes or doesn't like being caged. And if we cannot identify what makes the animal like or dislike being caged, invoking the preferences of the cat is pretty useless as an explanation. On the other hand, we may figure out, for instance, that the cat, in our case, doesn't seem to mind being caged in the dark, but it does seem to dislike being caged when it is in the light. In that case, we may say that the cat got out of the box because there was light. Let me draw this example here. Maybe this will provide a little bit of more clarity. Remember, this is our box. Our cat is inside. And we're trying to explain why the cat got out of the box. And we ruled out already the possibility of invoking or the justification for invoking that the cat doesn't like being in the box. That doesn't add any explanation. Or the animal thinks that there's something fun to do outside of the box. That doesn't add much of an explanation. However, we may find, for instance, that the animal gets out of the box particularly quickly when there's a light outside. When there is no light, our cat may want to stay there. Now you may say, okay, so what's going on is that the light likes to get out when the light is on. It doesn't like to get out when the light is off, when it's dark. Let me highlight that verb, to like. What does that add to our explanation? The one thing that we know based on observation is that when we turn on the light, the animal gets out. When we don't, the cat doesn't get out. We don't need to invoke this preference from the cat, not for this example at least. This is invoking the preference of the cat is unnecessary in this example. It's not always the case though. In some cases, and we'll learn about that later, we may want to invoke some characteristic of the cat, like the cat preferring something or liking something or knowing something, but we won't do that unless it is really necessary. We want to be very economic in terms of our what kind of psychological characteristics we attribute to a learning organism. And this is true not only of the cat, it is also true of human organisms.